Good day, everybody. My name is Thabo Sebulai. I'm an economics teacher at Tsoseletso High School in Bloemfontein. Today, we are going to go through the question paper that was written last year. That's economics paper 2, as well as to give some tips of how to approach the questions. This broadcast is intended to help those candidates who will be writing their supplementary exams. It is my hope that you are going to benefit from this broadcast as we go through the paper 2 that was written last year. Now, without really waste of time, I would like us to go straight to the question paper and look at the answers, and also to point out some of the mistakes that the candidates did commit last year. So it is my hope that as I point out these errors, you are going to avoid such errors when you set for your supplementary exam. Okay, I'm gonna go straight to the question paper and look at section A. By the way, we are aware that there were some candidates who could not finish the entire paper last year because they feel that the time allocated to the paper is very little. But you've got to learn to write within the allocated time, that is 1.5 hours. Let's go straight to section A and look at question 1 as it appears on your screen. I'm just going to go through this because this was not a very difficult question. The candidate did not really struggle on this question. The first question there, as you can see, it's multiple choice, 1.1. Where you are given 3 options and you have to choose one that is correct. If you look at the first one, 1.1.1, in economics, the term short run refers to a period where factors of production can change. And your answer there would be, let's look at the answer from those 3 options. Your answer there would be A. And please remember, just to write next to the number, write the letters only. Write the correct letter only. It's not necessary for you to write the words, but if you prefer to write the words, then please write the whole word. Don't just write half of the word. Write the entire answer. Otherwise, if you write half of the answer, you are not going to be credited for that. And then let's go back again to the question. 1.1.2, in a perfectly competitive market, products are heterogeneous, A, B, homogeneous, C, differentiated. The answer there is very obvious. The answer is homogeneous. Let's go to 1.1.3. 1.1.3 there. Which one of the following is a characteristic of a monopoly? A, goods are homogeneous. B, monopolists are price takers. C, there are no close substitutes. The correct answer there is C, there are no close substitutes. And then we go to the next question, 1.1.4. 1.1.4 says, government intervention in the market ensures sufficient staple food for the poor by setting prices. The missing word there, the option provided is A, maximum, B, minimum, C, limited. The correct answer would be maximum prices. 1.1.5, the agreement reached the agreement reached in 2002, which focused on environmental sustainability, is known as the option A, Johannesburg Summit, option B, Rio +20 Summit, option C, Kyoto Protocol. The correct answer would be Johannesburg Summit. And then the next question, 1.1.6, South Africans who travel overseas are called tourists. Option A, inbound tourist, B, outbound tourist, C, domestic tourist. The answer is an obvious answer there. That would be outbound tourist. And then 1.1.7, the question as it appears on your screen there, the sustainable use of natural resources is known as A, pollution, B, conservation, C, preservation. The correct answer would be conservation. And then 1.1.8. 1.1.8, the question read as follows. The promotion of South Africa as an international tourist destination is the responsibility of A, the private sector, B, international organizations like Greenpeace, C, South African tourism that is set. The correct answer would be South African tourism. Like I said, there wasn't really a big problem on this question. Now let's go and look at 1.2. Now 1.2, candidates were required to match column A, the concepts in column A with the description in column B. Let me just read you the concepts in column A. 1.2.1, explicit cost. 1.2.2, shutdown point. 1.2.3, cartel. 1.3.4, perfect market. 1.2.5, higher disposable income. 1.2.6, negative externality. 1.2.7, domestic tourism. 1.2.8, administered prices. And then you can see the description in column B. Some of those descriptions describe the concept in column A. Now let's look at the answer for the first one, explicit cost. The answer there for explicit cost, it's I. Actual expenditure of a business, for example, wages and interest. That's 1.2.1. And then 1.2.2, the shutdown point. What is the shutdown point? The shutdown point, we match it with a C, where marginal cost is equal to average variable cost. That would be the correct answer. Then let's look at 1.2.3. A cartel. What is a cartel? A cartel can therefore be matched with column D. It's when a group of producers form a collective monopoly. That's what a cartel is. And then let's look at 1.2.4. 1.2.5, higher disposable income. Higher disposable income, 1.2.5, can be matched with A, leads to a growth in tourism because people have got more money in their pockets now. Now they can spend that money on tourism. Therefore, as a result, there will be growth in tourism. Now let's look at 1.2.6. 1.2.6, negative externality. Negative externality would definitely be an aircraft noise. That's a noise pollution. It's a negative externality, we know that. And then 1.2.7, domestic tourism. What is domestic tourism? Domestic tourism can be matched with description G, when people traveling within their own country. That is known as domestic tourism. And then 1.2.8, administered prices. Administered prices, these are prices that are controlled by government-appointed authorities. Those are known as administered prices. And then The only challenging part in this question 1 was 1.3. Let's look at 1.3. It's always a challenging part of the question, 1.3, where candidates are required to give one term or one economic concept for the descriptions that appear on question 1.3. Now let's look at the first description or the first statement, 1.3.1. In this case, you need to understand your concepts. You need to understand your basic economic concept, because if you do not understand your basic economic concept, then you are going to have a difficulty in answering this part of the question 1.3. So I would advise all of you that please, when you study a particular chapter, don't skip the concept. Go through the concept, and when you revise, just make sure that you try to test yourself on these concepts without even looking at them, without referring at the textbook. Just try to define these concepts again. Now let's continue and look at 1.3.1. The minimum profit required to prevent an entrepreneur from leaving the industry. What's the answer there? The answer would be normal profit. Normal profit. The normal profit keeps entrepreneurs in the industry. Let's look at the second description, 1.3.2. The amount by which the total cost increases when an extra unit is produced. The answer there would be the marginal cost. And then 1.3.3, a situation where it is impossible to increase the welfare of one person without making another one worse off. We all know that that concept means that description can be best described as Pareto efficiency, or just Pareto optimal, or just the word Pareto. It's enough to answer that question. 1.3.5 or 1.3.4, a sustained and significant increase in the general price level. That one was pretty obvious. There's no one who got that one wrong. That is inflation. And then 1.3.5, traditional knowledge that has a practical application for the daily survival of local communities. The answer there would be your indigenous knowledge system, sometimes referred to as IKS in our different textbooks, IKS or indigenous knowledge systems. Then we're looking at 1.3.6, runaway inflationary conditions, where the general price level increases by more than 50% per month. Of course, I suppose that we all know the answer there. That is known as hyperinflation. There's one country in Africa that suffered that hyperinflation, which is Zimbabwe, years ago. So that's all. That's all in question 1. Remember, the first part of the question, 1.1. Each answer there is 2 marks, and then 1.2 it's 1 mark each, and then 1.3 is also 1 mark each. The total of the question it's 30, as well as the section, it is 30. Now I would like us to continue to section B. Remember, in section B it will still be the case. The structure of the paper hasn't changed. You're still going to get the same paper where question 1, section A, is compulsory. You have to answer all those 3 sub-questions in question 1. That is the multiple choice, the matching type of questions, as well as giving one word for the descriptions in the question. In section B, again, you're going to get 3 questions, and you are expected to answer 2 of the 3. Remember, and in this question, you can only spend about 20 minutes. And in the first question, it is recommended that you spend at least, let's look at it, 15 minutes. 15 minutes, section 1. Section A, question 1, 15 minutes is 30 marks. But now, in section B, each question of section B, please don't go beyond 20 minutes. Now let's look at the first question, question 2 of section B. There are these questions 2.1. 2.1 has got 3 sub-questions, 2 sub-questions, 2.1.1 as well as 2.1.2. Let's look at 2.1.1 of question 2.1. It says there state 2 characteristics of monopolistic competition. Now, this is what I want to highlight on this question. Learners have got a problem. Our candidates seem not to understand the difference between a monopolistic competition and a monopoly. So I advise you to go back again to your notes or to your textbook. Try to familiarize yourself again with the different types of market structure, especially a monopoly and a monopolistic competition. Sometimes a monopoly can also be referred to as a monopolistic business. Now, when it says a monopolistic firm, it does not necessarily mean it's a monopolistic competition. So I do understand where the confusion comes from. Monopolistic competition remains monopolistic competition. But sometimes a firm that operates in a monopolistic kind of a competition, it's a monopoly. Did you hear what I said? A firm that operates in a monopolistic kind of an environment, it remains a monopoly. But on the other hand, we've got a monopolistic competition. So my advice is that differentiate between the two, because you tend to be confused by the two concepts, monopoly, monopolistic competition. If you are required to give characteristics of a monopolistic competition, then you give characteristics of a monopoly. Or when a monopoly is referred to as a monopolistic firm, you give characteristics of a monopolistic competition. Just be careful of that. Right, the first question there, 2.1.1, it says state 2 characteristics of monopolistic competition, not monopoly this time. Right, let's look at the answers. You can have more than that. We know there are a number of these characteristics as I've shown on the screen there. One of the characteristics is that there's a large number of producers or sellers who are active in this monopolistic competition, right? The second one, the nature of the product is differentiated, or we can say they sell heterogeneous products. It is still acceptable. And then bullet number 3, entry and exit into the market is free, relatively easy. Bullet 4, another characteristic there, businesses have little control over the price of the product. Bullet number 5, information for both buyers and sellers is incomplete. And then the last bullet there, non-price competition and branding play an important role in monopolistic competition. Of course, we are aware that some of the characteristics have been left out, but all correct characteristics will be credited. Here, only 2 were required for 1 mark each. Right. Can we go back to our question paper and look at the next question? 2.1.2. Also for 2 marks. What will happen if one firm in the perfect market decides to increase its selling price? It was a very confusing question, this one. What will happen if one firm in the perfect market decides to increase its price? Now, you need to learn to make a clear distinction between the industry and the individual firm in a perfect market or in a perfect competition. And you also need to understand how prices are established in the industry. And why are firms or producers who operate under conditions of perfect competition, why are they regarded as price taker? You must be able to do that. And you must also be able to illustrate this graphically, because the graphs are very critical under perfect competition. Now let's look at the answers to 2.1.1. It was a challenge for most of our candidates, this question here. What will happen if one firm in the perfect market decides to increase its selling price? This firm will not be able to sell any units due to high levels of competition. Or the market price will remain unchanged. Because remember, all the firms that operate in the under perfect market, they are all price taker. So they will not change the price. Or another alternative there could be the firm will go out of business if they do that, if they decide to increase their price. They will go out of business. Why? Because if you increase your prices and your competitors do not change their prices, it is very likely that your clients are going to move away from you to your competitors. Right. Now, let's come to 2.2. 2.2, I know these data response questions are still a challenge. Here we've got an extract that is based on the market failure. I'm just going to read. When you get an extract like this one, it is very important for you, before even you read the extract, it's very important for you to go through the questions first, like so that you are able to answer the questions when you go to read your extract. Now let's just go through the questions again. 2.2.1. These are questions based on the extract. Explain the term toll for 2 marks. 2.2.2. What method can the government use to ensure that the introduction of toll roads is the best decision? 2.2.3. How can toll roads lead to market failure? 2.2.4. Argue in favor of the implementation of toll roads. Right. Now, after you have gone through the questions, thoughtfully, then you can go and read the extract. I'm just going to read the extract very quickly. Toll roads, was this the best decision? There are major debates surrounding toll roads in South Africa, with many consumers unhappy and undecided whether it will really benefit the economy. The major question is whether the government has examined all the positives and the negatives regarding toll roads. This was adopted from the Business Times in 2013. Now let's go through the questions again and answer the questions. Okay, the first question based on the extract. Explain the term toll. Here, I think I would like to emphasize the fact that our candidates or our learners do not really take into consideration the current economic issues, which is very, very important. And for you to be up to date with the current economic issues, it means you've got to abreast yourself. You've got to update yourself with the news. You've got to read newspapers. You've got to read magazines, that are economically relevant. That's the only way that you can keep yourself up to speed with the current economic issue. Because in this question, it was clear that our candidates do not know the difference between toll roads and e-toll. It was a shocker for us. We did not expect that. Now, the first question there, it says, explain the term toll. Now, toll is referred to as a billing system used on certain highways in the country. Your N1, there are a number of toll gates in N1. There are a number of toll gates on N3. N3, that road from Gauteng to Natal, there are toll gates there. Or we can also say that roads or parking bays or a fee. What we know is that a toll is a fee that you pay for using certain highways, or it's a tax that is still acceptable. Let's look at the second question, 2.2.2. What method can the government use to ensure that the introduction of toll roads is the best decision? In the extract, let's just go back to the extract and see. There's a statement, the last paragraph. The major question is whether the government has examined all the positives and the negatives regarding toll roads. Now, what is that? What is that examination of positive and negative? It's actually your cost-benefit analysis that the government has got to do before they implement the tolling system. Or just the CBA is still represent the cost-benefit analysis. Or other alternatives is market research. The government could do a survey. They could do what we call strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis, or SWOT analysis. Or they could do an impact study. They could do an environmental study. They could do. They could look at the positive and the negative aspects as it reflects on the extract. Or they could do what we call needs broad public participation. They could do broad public participation, where they inquire from the members of the public how do they feel about the implementation of toll roads. Or others could say they could do a feasibility study. Those would be the correct answer. Now, answers. So let's look at the 2.2.3. How can toll roads lead to market failure? Market failure seems to be a problem. We realize that our candidates still has got a problem to differentiate between market failure as well as public sector failure. There was a problem there. Market failure is not the same as public sector failure. Now, let's look at the answers here. How can toll roads lead to market failure? Companies can pass the additional cost on to consumer. That's a market failure. The money is meant to be collected from the companies or from businesses. But businesses, what they do, they pass on. They shift the cost to the consumer. Or there could be a higher cost of production. That's a market failure, because the intention here is not to increase the production of is not to increase the production cost. The aim is actually to collect a fee so that roads can be maintained, but it has got some third party or second party effects that are negative, and we call that negative externality. So that makes it a market failure. 2, it could lead to a reduction in output or supply of goods and services. And 3, mass action against e-tolling can disturb the free flow of goods and people, disturbing the economy. Now, any answer here that indicates how this could cause a disturbance in the economy would be accepted as the correct answer for toll roads to cause market failure. Now let's look at 2.2.4. Let's look at 2.2.4. 2.2.4. The question said, argue in favor of the implementation of toll roads. Here also we expected learners our candidates to speak positive, to speak to speak for the implementation of toll roads, to convince us what is it that is good that will be brought by the implementation of toll. But on the contrary, we discover that some of the candidates, they actually argued against the implementation of toll roads. Now, if we implement toll roads, this would be the benefits: a source of income for the government or for the province. Secondly, money needed to maintain the roads and infrastructure. Thirdly, it could lead to job creation. Any other positive response with regard to the consumer, the businesses, the government, and the foreign investor would be acceptable. Now, let's go back to the question and look at the next question, 2.3. 2.3, there we have it, 2.3. In this case, we have a graph that is given there. based on the long-run equilibrium in a monopoly market. Now, you've seen the graph here. Now let's look at the question. Let's go through the questions quickly. 2.3.1 indicate the profit maximization point of the monopolies in the graph. 2.3.2, how many units will be produced at the maximization point. 2.3.3, determine whether the business is making an economic profit or an economic loss. Show all calculations. 2.3.4, what favorable condition may the monopolist enjoy in comparison to other market structures? So this graph here, it's a monopolistic graph, as you can see, the long-run equilibrium in a monopoly market. Now let's go to our memorandum and look at the answers. These are the answers based on those questions. 2.3.1, indicate the profit maximization point on the monopolist. Our profit maximization point, as you can see on our graph, would be that point where the marginal cost is equals to the marginal revenue. Where is the marginal cost? This is the marginal cost, and the marginal revenue is this one. So our answer there would be at C, would be at point C. And then the next question, 3.2.2, how many units will be produced at the maximization point? The answer is 100. Let's just go back again. As you can see, where the MC intersect the MR, the quantity there is 100. So that would be the output at the profit maximization point. Right, and then the next question there, 2.3.3, determine whether the business is making an economic profit or an economic loss. Show all calculation. Before you tell whether the business is making an economic profit or an economic loss, you need to do your calculation. Now what we've done here, we've tried to calculate the total revenue. The total revenue, we know that the business produces 100 units and they're selling it at 600, and it costs at 6 and at the price of 6, and then it costs them 4 rand. Now what we do, you take your quantity or your output, you multiply it by the price. So in our case, in order for us to determine the total revenue, we would say 600 multiplied by 6 multiplied by 100 gives us 600, and 4, which is the cost, multiplied by the output, it would be 100, and that gives us 400. That can be determined from the graph. Let's see. You see, the price that will be charged by the firm is 6, and it costs the firm 4 rand. That's why we have to multiply 4 by 100 to determine our total cost, and 6 by 100 to determine our total revenue. Now, after we have done that, after we have determined our total revenue and our total cost, now we can do the necessary subtraction. In order for us to determine profit, we know that profit is equals to the total revenue minus cost. So then we do our substitution. Our total revenue, as we have calculated, is 600, and our total cost, as we have calculated, is 400. Therefore, 100 minus 400 gives us 200. Or alternatively, this is what you could have done. You could have taken the 6 rand as your selling price, and then subtract your cost price, which is 4 rand, and then it will give you 2. Then that 2 rand you multiply by the quantity, which is the profit maximization quantity, and it will give you an amount of 200. And then you get 3 marks for doing the calculation. Now you need to answer the question. Determine whether this business is making economic profit or economic loss. Now you've got to end with that statement. The business is making an economic profit. That's with a mark. Right. And then 2.3.4 still on the graph. What favorable conditions may the monopolist enjoy in comparison to other market structure? The monopoly is the only supplier. These are the answers. The monopoly is the only supplier of that particular product. That gives it an upper hand in the market. The monopoly is at liberty to set their own prices, which means they can charge higher prices, they can exploit consumers because of those higher prices. They decide on their production levels, or they can restrict the input. They are protected by the law. Monopoly is also protected by the barriers of entry. Monopolies, they are also protected by favorable geographical area. Monopoly does not produce at the lowest possible cost. The monopoly is least efficient at allocating the resources, and perfect competition is the most efficient at allocating resources. Out of the four structures, only the perfect competition is the most efficient. Monopoly and the others, they are not very efficient in terms of allocating the resources. Let's just move quickly and look at the next question. Then we've got two questions in order for us to wrap up this question 2. 2.4, explain how the immobility of factors of production can cause market failure. There we go again with market failure. So market failure has to be addressed in detail. You've got to read and study market failure in detail. Look at the examination guidelines. Look at your textbooks. Look at your notes. Look at your Mind the Gap study guide, and deal with this market failure in detail. Look at the causes and the consequences thereof. And you have to fully understand each cause, right? Don't just target one or two of them, but know all of those causes as well as their effects. Then you are safe. You can answer any question on market failure. Right. So in this case, they require of you, they were required to explain how the immobility of factors of production can cause a market failure. Let's quickly go through the answer. Right. The answer 2.4, how the immobility of factors of production can cause market failure. Firstly, we know that markets may not be able to respond to consumer demand immediately. If the factors of production cannot respond and move around easily, they are still immobile. They are not easily movable. Secondly, resources tend not to be very mobile, and they do not adjust easily to consumer demand, which means that when the consumer demand adjusts itself, then the resources take time to adjust to the new demand. And then thirdly, labor may take time to move into new occupation and geographical areas. For example, family ties, friends, convenience, as well as schools. These are some of the factors that would make it difficult for labor to move from one job to the other, or from one area to the other. And then we've got unskilled labor. The unskilled labor is not able and is not willing, and it does not always have time or money to gain skills they need. And as a result, it will cause unemployment, or employment will occur but at low salaries. And then the next point, physical capital cannot easily be moved to places where they are needed. For example, factory buildings cannot really move from one area to another because it's not mobile, as well as land and others, and other infrastructure. And the last point there, it takes time for industries to adapt to new technology. This is what we call structural changes. When new technology is adopted, then it takes time for the industry to adapt to this new technology. For example, a computer-assisted production. Now, if I may comment on this question, 2.4. The question says, explain how the immobility of factors of production can cause market failure. Now, our candidate, they discussed factors of production in general. They did not really answer the question. So you must be careful. Make sure that you understand the question and you answer the question directly. Don't beat around the bush, and discuss this in general, but answer the question. Okay, let's go to the next question. The next question, 2.5, and then it says there, explain how Sasol can compete in an oligopolistic market. This question was also a challenge. How Sasol can compete in an oligopolistic market with other petrol selling companies in South Africa. Now, what candidates did not realize with this question is that this was an indirect question, because they did not realize immediately that this question was all about non-price competition. So you've got to expect indirect questions from the question paper. If you suspect that it's an indirect question, then it is an indirect question, please. Now, let's go through the answers for this question. This is what you can say. Sasol will engage in non-price competition. You are telling the examiner here that this is all about price competition, non-price competition, and you are being credited for that. You're getting 1 mark for that by focusing on some of the following. Then you give the following: advertising and marketing, it's 1 mark. Example would be television and radio. This is what Sasol can do to compete in an oligopolistic market with other petrol selling companies. 2, additional services. For example, convenience stores. 3, branding, Sasol logo. For example, fuel for cleaner engine. Branding, Sasol logo. Okay, we've done that. The next one, friendly staff, e.g., offer additional services such as tire pressure check. The next point there, clean sanitary facilities, which are cleaned regularly. Additional services, for example, such as the baby room. The next point, competition, for example, where clients would win a car. The next one, loyalty rewards for customers. For example, if you fill up to a certain amount, you're getting a free engine wash. Collaborate with businesses. For example, the fast selling food, they could get one of the fast food outlets in their filling station. And advertise with and in conjunction with other businesses. The next point, account holders, certain companies filling now and only paying at month end. Any other answer that will give us how Sasol can compete with other petrol selling companies in an oligopolistic market. Right, now let's move on to question 3. Question 3, let's look at question 3. The first question, 3.1.1. Give 2 examples of World Heritage Sites in South Africa. Now, I must pause to indicate here that our candidates could not differentiate between World Heritage Sites as well as Cultural Heritage Sites. Answers that we expected on this question 3.1.1 were World Heritage Sites, those that were declared by the United Nations as World Heritage Sites in our country. But we also have our own cultural heritage sites that were not necessarily declared by the United Nations as World Heritage Sites. Now let's look at some of the answers. These are the answers that we expected. 1, Mapungube is one of those World Heritage Sites in South Africa. The Vredefort Dome. Number 3, the Sterkfontein Caves or the Cradle of Humankind. You know, it's the same. You can say Cradle of Humankind or Sterkfontein. Robben Island, it's also a World Heritage Site. Richtersveld Cultural and Botanical Landscape, that's one of them. Ismangaliso Wetland Park, it's one of them. Or Greater St. Lucia Wetland Park. And then we've got the next one, the Cape Fynbos region in Cape Town. Or the Table Mountain, or the Agulhas National Park. And lastly, one of our World Heritage Sites there is the Ukhahlamba Drakensberg Park. We expected 2 from you. Then let's look at this 3.1.2. The question there, it was about the influence that tourism would have on the lives of the poor. How can tourism influence the lives of poor people near tourist destination? How can it influence the lives of poor people near tourist destinations? This is what tourism can do to the poor people. Those poor people can get employed because of tourists coming to their area. Secondly, they could sell goods and services to the tourists. They could sell their products or the products that they've made to the tourists and earn income from such sale. Here, any other positive or negative argument. We also know that on the negative side, tourists, when they come to areas, there could be drug trafficking that occurs, there could be prostitution, there could be an increase in crime rate, or there could be pollution, or it could lead to increased prices for the local people. So here we expected both positive and negative influences of tourism to the lives of the poor people. Now let's go back again and look at 3.2. 3.2, it's an extract again. The advice that I gave you is that read the questions first, thoughtfully, and then go and read the extract. Now let's look at the questions and let's answer those questions. The first question, based on the extract, what are resources that can be replaced coal? Now, I have to indicate here that you need to differentiate. You need to make a distinction between renewable and non-renewable sources. This was a very easy question, but some of our candidates still do not understand the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources. Now, what are resources that can be replaced coal? Of course, the answer is they are renewable resources. And then 3.2.2, what do you think is the aim of celebrating Earth Hour? Because that whole extract was about the celebration of the Earth Hour. Now, the aim of celebrating Earth Hour, we were looking at the following answers: to make people aware of the role played by the production of electricity and fuel to environmental damage. Secondly, it is to save energy, or to make people aware of the destruction of oil, coal, and gas. You know, basically, it was just to make people aware that when we produce electricity in our country, the production of electricity can cause environmental damage because we produce electricity from coal. So that can cause a great environmental damage to our environment. Now, 3.2.3, how can people reduce transport fuel consumption in order to sustain the environment? You cannot reduce fuel consumption by changing from leaded to unleaded petrol. You are still consuming petrol. The question is very clear. How can people reduce transport fuel consumption? It should be about the reduction of fuel consumption, not using an alternative fuel, so that we can have an environment that is intact. Now, these are the answers that we were expecting. This is what we can do. We can use means of transport that carry a large number of passengers, such as trains and buses. You know, some of the public transport, but that carry large number of people. Secondly, using lift clubs or traveling in groups. This is encouraged because it also reduces the fuel consumption. Or we can walk every time, or we can use bicycles, or we can use energy efficient vehicles, the so-called hybrid cars. So that's how we can reduce fuel consumption in order to sustain our economy. Okay, let's go to the next question. Our next question would be 3.3. 3.3, there we have a table there. Study the table below and answer the question that for this table is all about headline inflation classification of individual consumption. So you will study that table. You look at the table there. We've got 3 columns on the table. We've got actually 4 columns. The first column is about the category, item category. The second column is about the weight, and the third column is month of June. The fourth column is the month of July. Now the questions are as follows. What are unadjusted CPI figures? Let's go to the memorandum and look at the answers to those questions. Let's 3.3. Oh, there's a question that I skipped. Let me just go back to that question quickly. We skipped this question 3.2.4. That is based on the environmental, on the Earth Hour, celebrating Earth Hour. 3.2.4. In your opinion, why are non-renewable resources referred to as dirty? Now, the answers that we received here, they were unbelievable. Why are non-renewable referred to as dirty? Some of the candidates, this is what they said. They said they are dirty because they come from the soil, because the soil is dirty. And that is not the answer. That was not the ideal answer we expected. But these are suggested answers that we expected from our candidates. When used or when burned, those non-renewable resources, they produce greenhouse gases. That's why they are referred to as dirty. Secondly, non-renewable resources cause pollution, such as coal. We burn coal and it causes pollution. Thirdly, this will cause damage to the ozone layer or the environment, which will lead to global warming, and it will ultimately lead to climate change. So that's why they are referred to as dirty, the non-renewable resources. All right, now we can go to 3.3 and look at that table again. Here is the table. Here's the table again. Right, and it has got these questions, 4 questions. Now let's answer those questions. The first question, 3.3.1. What are unadjusted CPI figures? You know, CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. Now, the unadjusted CPI figures are known as headline inflation. Not many of our candidates got it right. The second question, 3.3.2. Why is the weighting of items in the basket of goods? You remember in our table, this very second column, it's a column that shows weights of those items. Now, the question, why is the weighting of items in the basket of goods important? Those weights are important because they indicate the relative share of each item in the basket that the consumer consumes. Or they show the importance of the total consumer spending on the various items. Or it is clear that food and beverages, housing and utilities, and transport's relative importance in total spending exceed that of others. You look at those items where households spend a lot of money on, then you can even refer to them to answer this kind of question. It shows how important is the weighting of these items. Let's look at the next question, 3.3.3. Why would you exclude food from the CPI basket when calculating core inflation? We know what is core inflation. Core inflation, it's a type of inflation that excludes prices of goods that are highly volatile. And therefore, food is one of those items. So core inflation excludes items that have prices that are highly volatile, like food. That means that have got substantive increase and decrease in prices. Or affected by government intervention, prices that are affected by government intervention. Because if government comes into the market to administer prices, they could also have a volatile effect. And therefore, they will have to be excluded from the calculation of core inflation. Now, 3.3.4, comment on the impact that the overall CPI index has on the consumer. Now you go back to the table, you look at one month to the other month. Like in the first point here, the first bullet, generally the CPI increased. Overall, the CPI index increased from 5.5 in June to 6.3 in July. And then secondly, consumers paid more in July than they did in June for the same item, which means the cost of living has increased. The June's figures is within the inflation target range, which is about 3 and 6. But the July figures, they are just slightly outside the target range, affecting the cost of living again in a very negative way. Or you could say also we use it to measure inflation as well as economic growth, the CPI. Then you'll still be relevant. Let's move on to the next question, 3.4. 3.4, this is what was required of our candidates. Discuss the economic benefits of tourism for the government and the infrastructure development. Again, tourism, it's a very, very important concept that you'll have to go and study and prepare, because most of our candidates do not really prepare this part of the work thoroughly. So it is important for you to be able to distinguish between, to go through this tourism in detail and study it and understand it to your satisfaction. And know the benefits of tourism to the different sectors like your household, your business, your government, your infrastructure development, as it is outlined in your guideline. Also, you must be able to differentiate between the benefits and the effects of tourism, as it is outlined in your guideline, the benefits and the effects of tourism. Now, in this question, discuss the economic benefits of tourism for the government and infrastructure. They've only selected two beneficiaries there, the government and the infrastructure development. Now, let's look at the government. For the government, this is what they do. This is what they can. This is their benefit. They are able to raise revenue from tourism, because tourism makes a direct and indirect contribution to the government revenue through taxes. As tourists comes into the country, they pay airport departure taxes, air tickets. They also pay VAT because they spend their money within the country, or they pay excise duties. Secondly, they advertise the South African economy outside when we deliver excellent service to tourists, and we could create a good image of the country. When we treat them well, they could go and advertise our country and the excellent service that they received in our country. It creates jobs and relieves poverty, because the government is under pressure to create jobs. So when we've got these informal businesses selling stuff to the tourists, then that's a way of earning a living, especially in the informal sector, like musicians, those who manufacture art pieces. They could sell them to the tourists. And the next one, it earns foreign exchange for the country, thereby increasing the foreign reserves in the country. For example, they come to our casinos and play in the machine slots. They pay for their accommodation, and they use our transportation forms. It's a very profitable source of foreign reserves, tourism, for the government. It is also an opportunity for the government to recover external costs, because the government has provided infrastructure not only for the tourists but also for the locals. Now, tourists also have got to pay for for the infrastructure that are used in our country. Next, with excellent service, tourism can create a good image for the country, such as public amenities, the showers that you find at the beach, in our different beaches in the country. You can also achieve socio-economic objectives of the government, which is one of the macroeconomic objectives of the government. They could be achieved because of tourism, such as black economic empowerment and small, medium, and micro enterprises development. They could all be achieved by the government because of tourism. So this is what tourism can do to the government. This is how the government can benefit from tourism. And now let's look at infrastructure development. All infrastructure built to support tourism become an asset to the country, such as the information services. Even after the tourists have left the country, we can still use such facilities. The second one, residents and tourists enjoy adequate and well-maintained physical and basic infrastructure or social infrastructure, such as ambulances, medical clinics, and information services. 3, security services and police services that are provided for use by tourists are important for use even by the residents also. So not only the tourists benefit, but as the local resident, we also benefit from such services. Economic infrastructure, this is prioritized by the government to support tourism growth, such as the ports, the beaches, the rivers, and the lakes. As we've seen recently in our country, the upgrade of the infrastructure, it's actually to support tourism. Most economic corridors have tourism as an important focus. And the last point there, the public-private partnerships are sometimes used for the development of infrastructure. So anything that will benefit infrastructure development from tourism will be acceptable. Now let's look at 3.5. 3.5 there, why are industries often accused of contributing to land and water pollution? 3.5, we advise learners here, we advise our candidates to study through and thoroughly this economic issues such as environment, and use their analytical skills. And where their opinion is required, please do that. Give your opinion on the current economic issue. We've realized that our candidates lack insight because they don't really abreast themselves with the current economic issue. I mean, pollution, it's a current economic issue. Why are industries often accused of contributing to land pollution and water pollution? We expected our candidates to answer that question in relation to land and water pollution, not other types of pollution like air pollution, etc. No. So this is what we were expecting. Production process often cause pollution when people introduce foreign matter into the environment. You can start by explaining what is pollution first, and then from there you can take it from there and start being specific. Firms often release chemical and physical materials on land and in water. Water pollution kills the organisms that live in water. We know that the fish will die and plants will also die. Land pollution reduces the fertility of the soil. If we keep on degrading our land, we will not get food from our soil. Extraction of natural resources through mining often results in the damage to the land. Mines can cause a very huge damage to the land. There are processes such as deforestation, which often take place when firms cut trees in preparation for a construction of industrial site. So this is these are the reasons why companies are accused, why industry are accused of contributing to land and water pollution. That is all what we expected. Right, we are done with question 3. Now we go into question 4. Let's start right away with 4.1.1 for 2 marks. Give 2 examples of preservation of the environment. 2 examples of preservation of the environment. Now, these are the answers. Ecological systems, heritage sites. This is what can be done in order to preserve the environment. We could declare heritage sites. We could identify ecological systems. We could also identify and protect indigenous forests, the wetlands, the river mouth system. We could impose taxation for the usage of such. We could give subsidies for those who are taking responsibilities, and we can also encourage private ownership of such. We could also reserve some of them. We could also look into land expropriation. For example, the West Coast Nature Reserve. These are some of the examples that are there in terms of the preservation of the environment. So we encourage you to be able to discuss the state of the environment as well as other related concepts. Pollution, definition of pollution, types of pollution, erosion, types of erosion, deforestation, climate change, conservation, preservation. We encourage you to know such concepts and as you prepare for the supplementary exam. Now, the second part, the second question, 4.1.2, how can the consumers benefit from competition? Competition is very good in the economy because consumers will pay lower prices. There will be equal opportunities distributed in the economy. There will be better quality of the service that we get from the service providers. There will be a higher standard of living because of competition. So that's how important competition is in the economy. Now, 4.2, let's look at 4.2 again. Let me just take you back to the question paper to show you that 4.2 was also an extract. Right, this is the extract. This is the extract. South Africa to be one of the world's top 20 travel destinations by 2020. Let's go and look at the questions as well as the answers. 4.2.1. Identify the type of tourism illustrated in the photograph above. Now, here we've had many different answers here. We've had many different answers, but as you can see there, it's a traditional dance. We refer to that as cultural tourism. It's cultural tourism. And then 4.2.2, what is meant when South Africans are encouraged to explore their own countries, their own country? It simply means that South Africans are encouraged to travel or to be tourists in their own country. There's a campaign that is running in the country that encourages South Africans to travel and tour the country, the townships, the rural areas. It's known as short left. You can even use that as an example. This is what we call domestic tourism, where the locals are encouraged to tour within their country. Now let's look at 4.2.3. How would you ensure that South Africa becomes a world top 20 travel destination by 2020? This is one of the questions that wants you to give your insight or your opinion. This is what can happen. International tourism should increase even more than the 10.2% in 2012. I think this one it comes directly from the extract. Number two, tourism as an industry should contribute more to the GDP. Then it will become a world top 20 travel destination. Thirdly, we need to focus even more on domestic tourism. We need to encourage and promote domestic tourism in our country. And next, we need to encourage South Africans to explore their own country. That is domestic tourism again. We cannot overemphasize the importance of domestic tourism. We also need to reduce crime to create an enabling environment for tourists to come into our country. We need to market our country vigorously internationally. And we need to engage in natural exhibition. We need to develop our infrastructure to make it attractive and to make it friendly. We need to build on a tourist and friendly environment. And we need an upmarket technology in order for us to attract tourists to the country. Right, let's continue to look at the next question, 4.2.4, based on this extract again. Why is tourism viewed as a major job creator? Give examples from your own community. This is another question that wants you to give examples from your environment, from your area. Right. Now, tourism we know that is a labor-intensive kind of an industry. You get marks for that. It means that a large number of jobs are created with every unit of capital that is invested in the industry. The local population using beads and wood to create jewelry could benefit by selling their products to the tourist. Secondly, tourism employs many skills, from a hairdresser that is next to the road, tour guides offering various tours to tourists, provide immediate employment to local people, for example, live entertainment at the Gold Reef City or Table Mountain, anywhere in the country, anywhere in your local community, there should be some of these examples. So don't take it too far. Concentrate on your local community. There are very good examples there. Provide entrepreneurial opportunities to many individuals with small capital outlay. So this is what why tourism is viewed or regarded as a major job creator, because of the following reasons. Now we're moving on to 4.3. 4.3, let's just look at the question again, 4.3 from the question paper. It's a graph. Candidates were required to look at the graph and answer the questions. Immediately you can tell what type of a graph is this. It's an oligopolistic kind of a graph, which is known as a kinked demand curve. Now, question based on the kinked demand curve: which imperfect market structure is illustrated above? I've said it already, it's an oligopoly or an oligopolistic market. 4.3.2, name the above downward sloping curve. Name the above downward sloping curve. It is known as the kinked demand curve, like I already indicated. 4.3.3, explain how price leadership works in this type of market. Now, this is where I want to pause and request you to be aware of concepts such as collusion and the types of collusion such as price leadership, as well as a cartel. You need to be aware of those. Right. Now let's answer the question. Explain how price leadership works in this type of a market. The dominant firm will initiate a change in price. For an example, they will increase the price, and then they will realize economic profits or abnormal profits. Other competitors will also increase their profits because there's an oligopolistic kind of an arrangement. Or the dominant firm will decrease the prices, luring customers away from other firms into the market. Other competitors will do the same. They will decrease the prices, not to lose their market share. So that is what happened in an oligopolistic kind of an environment. And then 4.3.4, assume that the current selling price is 90 Rand. Explain why this business will not lower prices to improve its sales. Now, if we look at the graph again, as you can see, our price there, B, where the graph actually kinks, it's 90 Rand. Now the question says why this business will not lower prices to improve their sale. They will not lower the price below 90 Rand. Now the answer is this: below 90 Rand, this firm sees the demand curve as being relatively price inelastic. The firm thinks that if it reduces the price of its product, other firms will follow, because in an oligopolistic market, one business takes an action, the others observe, and then they follow. As a result, all other firms will sell a bit more output, but the firms will no longer be producing their profit maximization point, which means if they sell below that price, they will no longer be producing their profit maximization point. You can even go further to do your calculation to see what is it that's going to happen, or how much is it going to cost the firm if they lower the prices below 90 Rand. In this case, if a firm lowers its price to 50 Rand, that is below 90, the total income that the firm will earn will be 50 multiplied by 190, which gives us 9,500, as compared to the original income, which is 13,500. Like when you take 90 Rand multiplied by 150, it will give you 13,500. So therefore, if they reduce their price below 90 Rand to 50, this firm will suffer a loss about 4,000. So it is not a good idea for this firm to lower their prices below 90. Let's look at the next question. The next question, it's 4.4. Explain environmental taxes and marketable permits. Two concepts in one question. Environmental taxes and marketable permits as intervention strategies to measure. Explain environmental taxes and marketable permits as intervention strategies to achieve environmental sustainability. Now, here again, our candidates should be able to distinguish between the various measures that are used to achieve environmental sustainability. They should also be able to assess how effective is the South African government as far as the intervention with regard to environmental sustainability. You need to be able to explain how effective is the South African government as far as that is concerned. Are we succeeding or are we failing in order to achieve environmental sustainability? Now, let's look at levying environmental taxes. Environmental taxes are taxes that are imposed on output of goods that generate external environment cost. It's not tax that is charged for people to use the environment. No, it is a tax that is imposed on the output of goods that generate external environmental costs. Say if the production of the product causes pollution, then that kind of a product will have to be charged environmental tax. These kind of taxes are also referred to as green taxes, or sometimes they are also referred to as eco taxes. Carbon dioxide from the wineries and the vehicle tires are also taxed because they cause pollution. They cause external environmental cost. The tax rate is equal to the external marginal cost. That's how they try to equate the cost that the production of the good causes to the environment. They are trying to equate it to the tax rate. And then the marketable permits, what are these? The government will give each business a license to pollute to a certain extent. The aim here is actually to curb the pollution that is being caused by companies. They are given a license that allows them to pollute to a certain extent. So these businesses that have received these licenses, they can sell these licenses to other businesses that has a larger or increased pollution level. If one business wants to cause more pollution, they cannot get a license, then they can go and buy it from other businesses that have them already. In South Africa, marketable permits are granted by the Department of Minerals and Energy. It is the controlling body as far as that is concerned. And then the last question, in question 4, that would be 4.5. What are the effects of the implementation of minimum wages in South Africa? This was also a very challenging question, but which means this clearly shows that our learners did not really take their grade 10 work too hard, because if you took that work from grade 10 too hard, then you wouldn't have had a problem with this kind of a question, because this question is dealt with in grade 10 work. Minimum wages as one of the government intervention measure. Now let's go through it quickly. What are the effects of the implementation of minimum wages in South Africa? This is how the question should have been answered. The market fails to pay fair increases in salaries of people who are not in a strong enough bargaining position with their employer. If you do have such workers who do not have enough bargaining power to negotiate their salaries, and therefore such people would not get fair salaries or fair wages. Therefore, such people will be favored by minimum wages. As a result, they are unable to secure real wage increases, and their wages will remain low, and therefore unfair income takes place. They will not be given fair income because they are not in a favorable bargaining position. A minimum wage will increase the wage rate. However, less workers will be demanded. There will be an oversupply of workers in the labor market. If the government imposes a minimum wage, the minimum wage is generally above what is being paid currently. The aim of a minimum wage is actually to do away with the exploitation that happens in most of the industries. Like in the taxi industries, the domestic workers, the farm workers, they've got a minimum wage. It was increased from what they were getting from their employers. This will lead to an increase, but when a minimum wage is being set up, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of unemployment. The employers would lay off the workers, and you'll have an oversupply of workers wanting jobs. Example of workers that minimum wages are applied: the farm workers, domestic workers, as well as the taxi driver. Or you could have approached this question graphically. You could have used a graph to show. The graph on the vertical axis, you have your wage rate. On your horizontal axis, you've got your quantity of labor employed. And then you show by means of your demand curve for the demand for labor as well as supply for labor. And then you show that the minimum wage would be a wage just above the current wage from W to W1. And as we move the wage from W to W1, the quantity will come down from Q to Q1. You see, from your left to your right, Q to Q1. It means when a minimum wage is set, there will be unemployment. There will be an oversupply of workers because some of the employers would lay off the workers, claiming that they cannot afford that minimum wage, like it's happening now. And then you get your full 8 marks. And you can also explain the graph. The minimum wage improved the distribution of income from W to W1, like I've said. However, the quantity of labor demanded will decrease from Q to Q1. The quantity supply of labor will increase from Q to Q2. Therefore, an oversupply of labor, increase in employment will occur with a new minimum wage at W1. I would like us to continue. We have a very few minutes left. Now, I would like us to continue to section C and look at the first question, question 5. Question 5, under perfect market condition, under perfect market condition, the market price of products is determined through the interaction of supply and demand. Discuss the perfect competition under the following headings: a comparison of the demand curve of the individual producer and the industry profit maximization point. Now, let me just make the following remarks. This is how you were expected to answer the question. We were supposed to show the graph of an industry and the graph of an individual firm in the industry, and you were also supposed to discuss, to compare the two graphs. We were supposed to compare them because that is the first part of the question, the first part of the question. And then you were also supposed to show the profit maximization point. This is just one of the graphs that will help you to indicate the profit maximization point, where MC is equal to MR. You see where the dot is. That's the profit maximization point. The MC cuts across the MR. The horizontal line is the MR, and that diagonal line is the MC. So this is one of the graphs that you can use to show the profit maximization point. And then you also discuss that graph underneath. Or, alternatively, you could have used this graph to show the profit maximization, but you could have used this approach, the total cost approach and the total revenue approach. And your profit maximization would be the gap between the TC curve and the TR curve as the distance between A, B. That's your profit maximization. That's where business is making the most profit. We call it the profit maximization point. This is how you could have done it, either through this graph or this one to show the profit maximization point. And then you also discuss it underneath. And then let's look at the additional part of the question. The additional part of the question, if we just go back again, it says, the additional part of the question, let's just look at it again. Yeah, it says, in your opinion, does the Competition Act of South Africa promote fair competition? That kind of a question has to be answered with a yes or a no. For every yes, you motivate. For every no, you have to motivate. As you can see from the memorandum, a mark was allocated for the yes. And that is the argument. Why do we say the Competition Act in South Africa right. So in this case, we argue in favor of the Competition Act. You tell us what is the aim of Competition Act. You talk about the objectives of the Competition Act. What is it that it do? What is it that it does? And you also talk about the three institutions of competition that were created by the Competitions Act, like the Competition Commission, what it does, the Competition Tribunal, what is its role in the competition, the Competition Appeal Court, what are the roles of these three competition institutions. And you could also give examples of the cases that were investigated by the Competition Commission, as well as the outcomes, like this, the BMW overpricing of cars, the tire industry. We know there was a collusion there. The construction industry, when stadia were built before the World Cup, we understand that there was a collusion there. The Tiger Brands was also fined for colluding. The cell phone company, Telkom. And then also you could also tell us about the effects of this investigation, what happened ultimately. Now, that is what we expected from our candidates in this particular. This is an essay type question. It has got two parts. The main part for about, it was, I think, for about 26 marks. And then the additional part was about 10 marks. 2 marks for introduction, 2 marks for conclusion. And then let's look at question 6. Question 6, this is what it was required. Examine in detail causes of cost-push inflation. The second part of the question, has South Africa's inflation targeting policy succeeded? Again, here, this is what we expected. We expected our learners in the main part, the body, to discuss all the causes of cost-push inflation. Here again, inflation is still one of those topics that is still lagging behind. Not enough time is not enough time is spent on preparing inflation, both demand pull and cost push. So we encourage you again to go through inflation, different types of inflation. Please, it will be to your benefit. Now, these are the cause of cost push inflation that you should go through. Increasing wages. This is from the production side. This is from the supply side. Inflation that is caused by the supply side in the economy. Increase in wages, key inputs, increase in price of imported capital, exchange rate depreciation, profit margins, productivity, natural disasters, interest rates, increase in taxation, administered prices, increase the shoplifting and losses they also caused by employees. They are added in the prices by those who own the stock. And then Inflation targeting, has it succeeded? Yes or no, with motivation for 10 marks. You give both positive and negative effects. Right, both positive and negative effects. Why do you say inflation targeting has succeeded in achieving stability in the South African economy? Right, so in closing, I encourage you once again, ladies and gentlemen, to go through your study guides thoroughly, especially as far as the graphs are concerned. That study guide, Mind the Gap, the graphs are so well illustrated there. The content is so succinctly summarized for you to go through and prepare for the examination. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention, because most of our candidates cannot write a conclusion. In a conclusion, this is what we expect in a conclusion. A conclusion consists of the following. It can be a summary of what you have discussed in the body without really repeating the facts that you have already covered in the body. Or secondly, it will be your opinion or your valued judgment on the facts that you have discussed. Or it will be an additional support information to strengthen your argument or your discussion. Or it will be a contradictory viewpoint with a motivation, of course. Like in the case of inflation targeting, it can be a yes or a no. Or you can make some recommendations there. So this is how you go about the conclusion. Introduction is not a problem. Most of our learners can write an introduction. In conclusion, I would like to wish you everything of the best. May God give you strength as you prepare for your supplementary exam. And hopefully this time you will come out with smiles after you have corrected all the mistakes that you made in the first examination, the November examination. May the good Lord be with you. Thank you.